Hello, hello, welcome back to the Brain Trust. My name is Lionel. You're my co-facilitator, Mike. How you doing today, Mike?
Good brother yourself.
I am well.
All right.
All right, let's get to our article today. We have a good show for you all today. Share my screen. All right, first topic on the docket comes from CNBC. The hot trend in smartphones. Not buying a new one. Oops, excuse me. The smartphone industry has a two-part plan to tackle a global slowdown in sales. Sell a privacy new Sell a pricey new type of mobile device that is able to transform into a tablet and promote phones that can support super high-speed mobile internet standard 5G. But those flashy new features may not be enough to sway people to trade in their own phones immediately as long as they are in good condition. Samsung, the world's largest smartphone maker by shipment volume, earlier this year introduced the Galaxy Fold, a nearly $2,000 foldable smartphone that ran into early issues, which delayed its commercial release. Chinese phone maker Huawei, for its part, also announced a foldable phone that will cost around $2,600. CNBC's Beyond the Valley caught up people on the streets of London, Singapore, and Guangzhou, China, to ask what they thought of foldable smartphones, and the responses were not positive. It looks very strange. According to a smartphone user in Guangzhou, it's super bulky, said a user in Singapore. Phones are supposed to be for calling, for texting, and for being connected with the world, a user in London said about her expectations for smartphones. I don't think that I really need to pay that much to have this because I can pay a lot less and still be satisfied. Market research firm International Data Corporation said that smartphone shipment volumes for the first quarter of 2019 fell 6.6% one year after a 4.9% year over year decline in the fourth quarter of 2018. Ben Wood, chief of research at CCS Insight, explained that all smartphone makers face one overarching problem at the moment. Their devices look pretty much the same and they have similar functionality. When mobile phones first came out, there was tremendous innovation, but in hardware and software. But that's not now the case, according to Wood. The marginal gains over the different generation of products started to slow down, he added. Smartphone makers are also betting on super fast internet as an incentive to get more people to switch their existing devices for new ones that can support the so called 5G mobile internet. South Korea's three mobile carriers, as well as Verizon in the US, commercially launched their 5G services last month, while other countries like China and Japan are racing to launch their own versions of the nascent technology. Still, widespread adoption of 5G will take time since most of the infrastructure around the world is still being built. But there is some enthusiasm among potential customers of 5G phones. A user in Guangzhou said he would buy a 5G phone because it is trendy, but it also has a better internet system that will let him do more, including video streaming. It just makes everything easier for us, like social media, streaming Netflix, and stuff, another user in London said. The article really spells it out. The if the See, when mobile phones first came out, there was tremendous innovation, both in hardware and software, but that's not now the case. So stop sharing my screen here. When mobile phones first came out, there was a lot of innovation. There was a lot of bells and whistles. People were eager to get their hands on these smartphones, but now we've had our fill of all this innovation and bells and whistles. The next big thing doesn't afford us paying that much money to upgrade our smartphones.
Yeah, I was muted. Yeah, like I said before, that smartphones have become more utility based rather than luxury based. So there's no real need to actually upgrade them. They're like refrigerators. You only replace it if you need it, and it does exactly what it needs to do. Stores food and it keeps it fresh. Smartphones the same way. They search the internet. They provide application-based services, software as a service, and then the telephony aspect of communication. So for the most part, it does exactly what it needs to do, and then there's no real need to actually upgrade your phone. Now, what has happened with Apple in the past is that they have updated the software to degrade the battery, and then that forces you to upgrade your phone. We know that this is happening because they already admitted to this. So they see the writing on the wall that if phones don't sell for Apple, and which is their bread and butter, then they are out of business in that regard.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah. As I mentioned before, um, Apple also their older phones, people are not upgrading them at all, and these progressively steeper prices in phones, a lot of people don't want to pay. I've actually heard people say they don't want to pay that high price for a new smartphone. Right. Second topic for tonight comes from CNET. The internet is changing Africa, and the results are complicated. Cheap smartphones are flooding Africa, giving many of its citizens access to the internet for the very first time. Anyone can get into Nigeria's tech scene, says Chibuzor Obiro. That wasn't true just a few years ago. The 29-year-old developer Obiro began coding in 2014 when he was hired by Andela, a Chang a Chan Zuckerberg initiative sponsored tech firm that offers Africans paid training in software development. Back then, his colleagues were all men around his age and older. But in the past 5 years, the software development industry in Nigeria has become more mainstream as young Nigerians figured out they could learn to code and make money relatively quickly. Obiro says the industry's average age plummeted and its makeup became diverse. It's not just guys anymore, he said. At Andela, I was colleagues with ladies as well, much older women who just had kids, married men who had kids, women who wore the hijab. Widespread internet access is changing the African continent, largely thanks to the rise in smartphone ownership. Many Africans who are unable to afford costly broadband connections can now access the web for the first time via sub $50 Android phones. The rate of adoption continues to surge. A GSMA study predicts Africa will get 300 million new internet users by 2025. Now, the CTO of his own setup, Obira, and all of his old Andela colleagues are riding the rising tech wave. Africans say there's much to be hopeful about. Basic internet services tangibly improve quality of life. Something as simple as an app that coaches women giving birth saves lives in countries like Ethiopia, where a vast majority give birth outside of health facilities. Rudimentary internet access can facilitate a huge productivity boost from agriculture workers around the continent. Farmers, for instance, save precious time for by accessing market prices through their phones instead of a physical trip into town. But there, excuse me, but there are also, but there are some consequences to internet adoption that could temper optimism. Africa is a continent historically beleaguered by authoritarianism, unrest, and underdevelopment. The internet isn't inherently a force for progress or disruption, but instead is a tool that can be used for either of those ends. Some of the internet's applications are helping to build up Africa, while others are exacerbating the continent's problem. A citizen in Nigeria, Obira, is confident in the ability of internet media, both traditional and social, to educate and Africans. But he's also noticed a growing problem. There's a huge online betting market in Nigeria, he said. It's one thing to be able to walk to a shop and buy a ticket. It's another thing to access hundreds of betting platforms online. Gambling, particularly in the form of sports betting, rankles Africa's more developed nations. Around 60 million Nigerians aged between 18 and 40 bet daily, according to a poll from the news agency of Nigeria. Wow. This isn't a problem unique to Africa. The world's 10 most gambling prone populations live in first world countries. Australians are the world's leaders in losing money to gambling, and online sports betting is the fastest growing sector of the country's gambling market. The concern is that most Africans have more to lose than Western gamblers. Half of Nigeria's population lives below the poverty line, according to the World Bank, and millions of people bet what little money they have in the hopes of earning more. The betting motivation cited in NAN survey was a need to make a quick buck. There's a clear correlation between smartphone ownership and online gambling. Kings gamble more after buying a smartphone, according to a 2017 study by the Digital Skills Observatory, a Bill and Melinda Gates funded firm. Over 20% of participants bought a smartphone specifically for betting. Online gambling is aided through internet access and mobile payments platforms, which have bloomed in Africa throughout the past decade. Still, this is an area where the pros outweigh the cons. Mobile payment apps allow Africans to circumvent the continent's inadequate financial infrastructure. Just 34% of Africans had bank accounts in 2014, according to the World Bank. This makes a challenge out of tasks that Westerners take for granted, like paying bills for utilities. It's been a life changer, especially for Africans who don't live in cities. For the past few years, U.S. companies like Zola Electric and Blackstar Energy have begun setting up solar power equipment and infrastructure in rural parts of Rwanda, Tanzania, and the Ivory Coast in Ghana. These areas are often without access to either financial institutions or the energy grid. The electricity produced by Zola and Blackstar has brought electric lights to villages, for the first time replacing less effective and more dangerous kerosene lamps, enabled in many cases by Africans being able to pay bills remotely via mobile payment platforms. Zola can only operate in rural areas because of mobile platforms, which are a core part of the company's business model, according to Alessandro Pietrobon, the company's head of data and analytics. Customers who bought Zola products get the added benefit of having a transaction record, which Petrobon says acts as a proxy to credit rating with banks and other financial institutions. It sounds like a sales pitch, but it's backed up by a 2016 study published by MIT. Between 2008 and 2015, M-Pesa, Kenya's most used mobile payments app, had lifted 194,000 Kenyan households out of poverty. Assessing a mobile wallet improved the financial literacy of many users, which in turn helped pull them over the poverty line. Far from just improving lives, mobile payment apps have also saved them. Broken or inefficient financial systems, as well as corrupt author- and authoritarian governments, often stymie humanitarian aid. Mobile payments offer a solution. A fund, excuse me, as funds can be sent directly to those who need them. Essentially, Ebola aid workers in Sierra Leone were sustained via mobile payments in 2014. Humanitarian organizations use mobile payments to send money directly to 20,000 Somalian families during the famine in 2011. Without mobile platforms, Oxfam says, this aid would not have been possible. I'm a, um, I want to lose everybody here reading a longer article. Um, I saw at Facebook's F8 conference, a developer conference, that they had a few developers from Kenya in the audience because they onboarded them to help them with develop apps for Facebook. And as you see in his first picture, Mark Zuckerberg right in the middle. Zuckerberg chain of sponsored tech company in Nigeria. So you have a lot of companies that are sourcing, like might say a lot of you're sourcing talent from Africa, as we went over, such as the in Kenya, where they would have people assist artificial intelligence by identifying objects, and they will have them sit down at computer monitors for hours on end doing that. So, what Mike's been saying has been right that Africa's tech scene is years ahead of us in America.
by leaps and bounds. And when you really put it all into a summary, Africa is going, in terms of melanated people, Africa will be the bedrock and foundation of the future. And unfortunately, these discussions that we get into on other people's platforms will tell you otherwise. They'll tell you that that's not happening. And this article, you know, actually contradicts any of the naysayers in this regard. So when we talk about this stuff, it's not just to highlight it, but it's actually to put this on your docket, your personal docket, that this is what's going on. And if you don't become a part of this, you're going to get left behind. And there's only so many opportunities that's going to be available, and, for this whole entire agenda.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. Agreed. All right, let's get to our next article for tonight. All right, this one comes from SecureWorldExpo.com. Navy caught using malware to spy on Air Force. Wow. You can almost hear Jack Nicholson in his famous line from the movie A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. And in this case, the Air Force says the truth is this. Navy prosecutor got caught spying on the Air Force after sending malware to members of its legal team and to a news organization. The Air Force Times reports the bizarre turn of events stemmed from a decision by a Navy prosecutor to embed hidden tracking service into emails sent to defense attorneys, including one Air Force lawyer involved in a high profile war crimes case of a Navy SEAL in San Diego. The Air Force defense lawyer reported the tracking device to his information security manager, who concluded the malware was Splunk tool, which allowed the sender of the malware to gain full access to his computer and all files on his computer. Navy Captain David Wilson, Chief of Staff for the Navy's Defense Service Officers, wrote in an official memo. This is the case of Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher, whose trial is set to start just after Memorial Day weekend. And MilitaryTimes.com reports the case has been delayed because of these revelations, and the defense attorney in the case is asking for the current prosecutors to be rescued from the case. Why would the Navy breach the Air Force electronically? Why in the world would the Navy send malware to the Air Force? Apparently, it was an effort to capture IP addresses and discover who was leaking information on the Navy SEAL case to the media. Now, however, there's an issue of trust and a question of how far the Navy spying effort has spread, writes Navy Captain David Wilson. As of now, the Navy's defense bar cannot be certain that the malware unleashed in these cases has been contained rather than passed throughout the Navy and Coast Guard defense systems services system, a possibility now under direct investigation by the Air Force. As our clients learn about these extraordinary events in the media, we are left unarmed with any facts to excuse me, answer their understandable concerns about our ability to secure the information they must trust us to maintain. The situation has become untenable. Three dangers of one U.S. military branch spying on another. We asked CNN military analyst and Secure World keynote speaker, Colonel Cedric Layton, about the big picture risk that this has created by the cyber surveillance. Here are three dangers he identified. One, cyber civil war. From an ethical standpoint, one government entity inserting malware into the IT systems of another government entity could unleash what amounts to a cyber civil war, with different elements of the government attacking each other in cyberspace instead of in the courtroom. Two, breakdown of attorney client privilege cuts case at risk. The alleged introduction of malware into defense attorney IT networks within both the Navy and the Air Force by Navy prosecutors or investigators is an unprecedented act and raises all kinds of legal and ethical concerns. It may very well be illegal, since such an action would violate standards, attorneys' client privileges, as well as constitutional guarantees to a fair trial. This is a very bad idea that potentially could jeopardize the case against these defendants who, assuming they are not pardoned by the president, are accused of committing very serious crimes in violation of the law of armed conflict and the United Code of Military Justice. Three, chilling effect on freedom of the press. Since this effort was designed to stop leaks to the media, it could have the effect of unmasking journalists' sources, which could have a chilling effect on the constitutional guarantees of freedom of the press. At this point, at least one thing is clear. The situation has become both tense and dramatic. I did not know this was going on. This had happened, actually. This is a very serious problem when you have two branches of a military spying on each other. And I understand the motive. They want to spy on what the Air Force has and see who's leaking information about this case of a Navy SEAL. They want to keep a lot of things under wraps because of the sensitivity of it. I understand that, but then you have this coming out that they were doing it. The sheer the this coming out by itself is a Pandora's box, and having two branches spying on each other. This also leads to a question: will have this happened also in the, previously in the past, and this can have other nations use this as a way to put um, schisms in between two militaries, two branches of the military.
Well, spy games. I mean, you say you didn't know that any of this is going on, but that's plausible deniability. Seeing that you're a former Navy guy yourself, this is a very um, it's on a level that I can't even explain because I work in cybersecurity. This is on a level that has never been heard of before. Um, so what happens when they blame the Russians, they blame the Chinese or other state actors? It's easy for them to cover it up and to point the finger somewhere else when it's really them doing this type of stuff. Uh, you may have an actual war, and what happens if one of the Air Force jets comes down because it's been compromised through some kind of malware attack, and it's your guys on the battlefield doing it. You know what happens when the Army decides that they want to launch a malware attack against the Navy. You know, take the destroyers' radar systems offline, or take their communications gears offline. They can't communicate out, and they're sitting ducks in the water. This is very risky. This is not something to play games with, or even to laugh at. Um, Obviously, you got people that are not, that have different agendas within our government and our military.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I understand why they did that because of the case had been involving a Navy SEAL. The work he does itself is secretive, and this should have been handled in house. This situation of who was spying on who and why, and never lead to the press. But this can have rippling effect effects through the future. Well, the immediate future with other countries saying, why don't you trust this military, such and such. All right, go ahead.
No, we're not gonna say anything.
All right, our next topic is from QZ. The programmer who created Python isn't interested in mentoring white guys. Guido van Rossum is one of the world's most influential programmers. Van Rossum is the author of the general purpose programming language Python, which he started working on in 1989 and is now one of the most popular languages in use. According to a survey of users on StackFlow, a popular question and answer site for programmers, Python is the fastest growing major programming language and the most used after JavaScript. Python is free and open source, meaning anybody can use the language and modify it to suit their specific needs. In addition to creating the language, Van Rossum has overseen its development. Programming languages evolve over time, with changes made to add features and fix bugs. Modifications to the official version, generally suggested by active users of the language, go through a complex approval before managed by a founder of core development team. Van Rossum served as the benevolent dictator for life of Python's development until last year. And he stepped down from the post. As Python grew in popularity, Van Rossum noticed a problem. In a rare interview with the programmer in October last year, which was recently published on YouTube, he was asked about the lack of diversity among the people working on open source programming languages. He noted that it was an issue and said that those who ignore it because open source projects are available for anyone to contribute are not seeing the full picture. It's not just joining a project that's the problem. It's staying in the project, which means you have to feel comfortable exchanging emails and code reviews with people that you don't know personally, but you communicate frequently with online, he said. Van Rossum thinks that these exchanges can be difficult for women because of conscious bias and male driven cultural norms with open source communities. It's not just about writing the code. You have but you have stand up for your code and defend your code. And there is a certain male attitude that is endemic in many projects where women would just not feel comfortable claiming that she is right, he explained. A guy who knows less than that woman might honestly believe he is right. So they present a much more confident image. In his experience, Van Rossum sees incompetent men's ideas gaining acceptance more often than merited because they are more forceful in how they present them. Van Rossum believes that the different attitudes of women and men in programming communities is due to wider societal problems that we need to fix from the bottom up. I've always felt that feminism was right and we need to change the whole society, he said. In the meantime, he feels a responsibility to act in the place he feels a responsibility to act in the places he has influence, like in the Python community. He believes the key to making open source communities more inclusive is establishing and enforcing codes of conduct and mentoring. Van Rossum says that he now mentors women and underrepresented minority programs. But white guys can't forget it, he said. They are not the ones who need it most. In typical programmer speak, he calls mentoring a completely distributed democratic approach. Rather, he thinks it's important that men are educated about their biases. There are some guys who are super defensive when you tell them about this shit, but the majority of guys just don't think any better, he said. The first time I heard the term unconscious bias was maybe 5 years ago, and it was an eye opener. It's changed him, and he thinks it could change others. You can watch the interview with the writer Swapnil of the coding focused website TFIR. All right, so what this is interesting that he's saying this. This is very interesting.
this has been long known in the community for years. I talk about mentorship on here a lot, for this very reason, and I offer it because, just like the article states, the most disenfranchised people don't actually get the help necessary, so or get the mentorship that is necessary. So what happens is they get left out in the cold. Now somebody else earlier on a different panel brought up the point that why don't we have more black engineers and things of that nature? Well, guess what? It's because of reasons like this.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna.
So
Oh, go ahead.
the tech industry has a lot of structural racism in it. Even though Silicon Valley is extremely liberal, they're unapologetically liberal. There's still a lot of structural racism because you still have people who you still have people, pale faced people more importantly, and not even just pale faced people. You just have people in general who see melanated people in these environments, and they're very guarded in this regard, in terms of coding and stuff like that. For whatever reason, they have, like the article says, unconscious bias. I just call it flat out racism. There is no, to me, I think unconscious bias is a very loose and unacceptable term to use in a society that has structural racism. It doesn't make any sense. If you are a part of the privileged class, then you are also practicing racism in one way, shape, or form, whether you think so or not. It doesn't take much to expose that.
Mm. Yeah, he said that when some people were confronted, they couldn't take it. They didn't believe it. Hmm.
Well, it comes from two different sources, right? So the victim, which would be a melanated person, no one wants to believe or listen to that person. But when it comes from a pale faced person, then what happens here is now it's a discussion that people want to have. But uh, I argue that that's even more that there's even more racism in just that alone, because to deny the victim any sort of agency is part of the problem. So even though they want to have a conversation about it, they're having a conversation from a disingenuous standpoint.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Get to my next topic on the docket. All right. This topic comes from Forbes. Tesla on autopilot slams into stalled car on highway. Expect more of this. Wow. Here's a driving situation that I'm guessing most of us have all experienced at one time or another. You're driving along on a highway or freeway, moving at a relatively fast clip, say 60 miles per hour. The prevailing speed and as matched with other nearby cars, surrounded by a mild amount of traffic, but nothing so onerous as to bog down the overall flow of vehicles. A car to your left unexpectedly decides to dart into your lane, cutting down on the distance you had from the car directly ahead of you. It's one of those situations wherein the driver seems to want to swiftly go across multiple lanes of traffic, perhaps be perhaps belatedly realizing that there is an off ramp coming soon that they want to reach, and they had not been astute enough to gradually make their way over to the rightmost lane. The driver then makes another lane change, doing so into the lane to your right, now clearing the path ahead of you. Keep in mind that all of this is happening in a matter of a handful of seconds. Everyone moving at 60 plus miles per hour during the course of this series of eye blinking brief events. Upon the driver having shifted into the lane to your right, you can now see more readily what's ahead of you in your particular lane. Here's the rub. Turn out there is a car in your lane up ahead of you, which has either come to a crawl or might even be entirely halted, possibly stalled on the highway or freeway. because the other car had somewhat momentarily blocked your view. You had not been able to see this kind. You had not been able to see that this stalled car was a menace in waiting to you and your car. You don't know whether the driver you don't know whether the driver that had cut in front of you might have seen the stalled car and decided to make a quick escape, or whether they were merely completing their effort to get over into the rightmost lane for purposes of exiting at the next off ramp. Either way, that driver has left you holding the bag, a dangerous one for sure. Essentially, you've been handed a hot potato. As recap, you were zooming along in your lane, and there is a car sitting in your lane, motionless, waiting to get smashed into by you, which you had not detected until the last moment, partially due to an interloper. This is the moment that many drivers hope will never arise. Yet, it likely happens to many drivers, possibly with some substantial frequency, particularly if you are a daily driver that puts ample mileage on your car while commuting to work. I encounter these kinds of situations about once or so every 2 weeks during my hour and a half long commute each day, each way for work. Typically, you maneuver out of the situation, but barely, by the skin of your teeth. Though, with about 6,300 car accidents occurring annually in the United States, some proportion of car crashes are undoubtedly due to this kind of inadvertent setup. In a reported recent incident, a Tesla on autopilot, according to the driver, rammed into a stalled vehicle on the highway, doing so while the Tesla was moving along at a speed of around 60 miles per hour, and the crash occurred in a manner akin to what I just described as a driving scenario. Wow. According to the driver of the Tesla, another car cut in front of him, staying there fleetingly, then moving rapidly over to the next lane. And within moments, it became apparent that a car was stalled up ahead, and he and his Tesla were going to ram into it full force. He and his Tesla did so, and luckily he lived to tell the tale. Might be instructive to consider how this kind of a crash occurred and what it portends for Tesla drivers using autopilot, along with ramifications for autom- autonomous, self driving driverless cars in general. Let's take our Sherlock Holmes magnifying glass and try to ferret out salient characteristics of those kinds of automobile based death defying, though sometimes death resulting incidents. As I earlier suggested, sometimes you can maneuver out of the situation, while other times there is not any viable recourse, and you get pinned into rammed into the stalled car. Consider these key elements. Specific context in the moment. The context of the speed driving predicament is a big factor in what will transpire, since it determines what options might be viable and which ones are not. Driver mindset and actions. The thinking processes and actions of the driver are another crucial consideration for how the circumstances will play out. If you try to hit your brakes, the question arises as to whether you can come to a stop in time, though even if you cannot come to a halt soon, enough to prevent ramming of the stalled car, at least, or seeing worse here, at least if you can ratchet down speed of your car, you are going to reduce the likely amount of danger and resultant damage that can occur within you rear end the other vehicle. Beyond dealing with the speed of your car, you might perhaps swerve into another lane, either to your left or to your right, although allowing you to either avoid entirely the shell car or maybe only sideswiping rather than plowing into it head on. Of course, the swerving action might be blocked by other cars that are to your left or right, or you might be able to do the swerve. Yet other cars in the left or right lanes will then be disrupted by their movement into their lanes, possibly getting them directly involved in the pending crash. This often results in a domino-like cascade of cars hitting each other, doing so to avoid the sudden swerve that you made. Um, Again, I want to lose people. I understand what they're saying. What they're saying, excuse me. Basically what they're saying is Tesla on autopilot. If it's looking, it's obviously it's looking at the road ahead and side on the sides and the back. But if a car gets into its view, blocks what it can see ahead of that car that has now gotten into view, and that car is slowing down or stopped in the worst case scenario, then once that car jumps out the lane and the Tesla autopilot Tesla reads that the car that's in front of it has stalled, then it may not slow down or recognize that that car has stopped for it to slow down, and now you have a car accident. You rear-ended that car now, and they're saying that that's what can happen in a autonomous vehicle.
Yeah, the feature of this autopilot is really meant for an environment where everybody is on autopilot. So other vehicles that's going to be on autopilot, plus their new ground-based GPS that communicates with other vehicles to determine um, the proximity of other vehicles and where it's going to be on the map, is really meant for that. If you don't have other vehicles that can be compliant with autopilot, then you know it's it's not so much that it's autopilot's fault, but it's a matter of um, the environment not being accommodating to the system itself. Maybe in a place like with long highways like Arizona and New Mexico and things like that, autopilot could work there. But what happens in congested areas, that's just not it's not feasible with non next generation vehicles such as Tesla and the Fisker and the the i8, those type of technologically advanced vehicles. All those vehicles can work together if they're the only ones on the road. But what happens when you have legacy based vehicles, cars without any sort of technology to communicate out, it's a disaster. So the the infrastructure pieces that I'm referring to is 5G, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. All of these things come into play as to how they can, these vehicles can be interoperable with each other as well as the civilian infrastructure, the highway.
That's actually a good point. That's actually a lot more understandable. Um, Hello,
Hmm.
somebody else joined the chat.
Yo, that's me. I'm not sure why I can't see my avatar. What's good? What's going on, gentlemen?
What's going on? I think you signed. Okay, what's going on? All right, let me share my
You're
screen.
breaking up a lot, and
I'm break. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Hello, hello.
Hey, Lionel, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, Mike, can you hear me?
I think Mike may be having a problem hearing you. I'm not sure.
Okay. All right, let me read this next article. This one comes from physics.org. Formation of the moon brought water to Earth. The Earth is unique in our solar system. It is the only terrestrial planet with a large amount of water and a relatively large moon, which stabilized the Earth's axis. Both were essential for Earth to develop life. Paleontologists at the University of Munster, Germany, have now been able to show for the first time that water came to Earth with the formation of the moon some 4.4 billion years ago. The moon was formed when Earth was hit by a body about the size of Mars, also called Theia. Until now, scientists have assumed that Theia originated in the inner solar system near the Earth. However, researchers from Munster can now show that Theia came from the outer solar system and it delivered large quantities of water to Earth. The results are published in the current issue of Nature Astronomy. From the outer into the inner solar system, the Earth formed in the dry inner solar system, and the Earth formed in the dry inner solar system, and so it is somewhat surprising that there was water on Earth. To understand why this is the case, we have to go back in time when the solar system was formed about 4.5 billion years ago. From earlier studies, we know that the solar system became structured such that the dry materials were separated from wet materials. So the so called carbonaceous meteorites, which are relatively rich in water, come from the outer solar system, whereas the drier non carbonaceous meteorites came from the inner solar system. While previous studies have shown that the carbonaceous materials were likely responsible for delivering the water to Earth, it was unknown when and how this carbonaceous material and thus the water came to Earth. We have used molybdenum isotopes to answer this question. The molybdenum isotopes allow us to clearly distinguish carbonaceous and non-carbonaceous materials, and as such represent a genetic fingerprint of materials from the outer and inner solar system, explained Dr. Garrett Budd of the Institute of Paleontology in Munster and lead author of the study. The measurements came by the researchers from Munster to show that the molybdenum isotope composite of the Earth lies between those of the carbonaceous and non-carbonaceous meteorites, demonstrating that some of the Earth molybdenum originated in the outer solar system. In this context, the chemical properties of molybdenum play a key role because, as it is an iron-loving element, most of the Earth's molybdenum located in the core. The molybdenum, which is accessible today in the Earth's mantle, therefore originates from the late stages of Earth's formation, while the molybdenum from earlier phases is entirely in the core, explains Dr. Christoph Bunkart, second author of the study. Scientists' results therefore show for the first time that carbonaceous material from the outer solar system arrived on Earth late. But, but the scientists are going one step further. They showed that most of the molybdenum in Earth's mantle was supplied by the protoplanet Theia, whose collision with Earth 4.4 billion years ago led to the formation of the moon. However, since a large part of the molybdenum in Earth's mantle originates from the outer solar system, this means that the Theia itself also originated from the outer solar system. According to the scientists, the collision provided for sufficient carbonaceous material to account for the entire amount of water on Earth. Our approach is unique because, for the first time, it allows us to associate the origin of water on Earth with the formation of the moon. To put it simply, without the moon, there probably would be no life on Earth, says Thorsten Klein, professor of paleontology at the University of Munster. This is an interesting article because, since knowing that, that means there's things on the moon that are also precious. So the very material that the moon is made out of is the same material that the Earth is made out of, which increases its resourcefulness in terms of resource mining. Hello?
Yeah, you're. I can hear you, Lionel. I'm not sure what happened to Mike.
Yeah, that's interesting. You got any comments on that one?
I was just coming in. Because I'd heard you guys discussing 5G and EVs and stuff like that. I was going to chime in on that part of the discussion. I was just making my way over.
Oh, you
Uh,
go ahead.
well, no, I mean, as with regards to the relevance of this piece here, no, I don't have anything to chime in. I was just listening in on that piece.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So that means the moon has a lot of resources that the Earth has, since that collision rubbed off different materials from each celestial object before the collision. I'm guessing they swapped material, so they have somewhat of the same material. So yeah, this article comes from News 24. NASA unveils schedule for Artemis 2024 moon mission. NASA on Thursday unveiled the calendar for the Artemis program that will return astronauts to the moon for the first time in half a century, including 8 scheduled launches and a mini station in lunar orbit by 2024. The original lunar missions were named for Apollo. Artemis was his twin sister in Greek mythology and the goddess of hunting, wilderness, and the moon. Administrator Jim Bridenstine confirmed that Artemis 1 will be an uncrewed mission around the moon planned for 2020, which is next year. Next will come Artemis 2, which will orbit Earth's satellite with a crew around 2022, followed finally by Artemis 3 that will put astronauts on lunar soil in 2024, including the first woman. The three will be launched into space by the biggest rocket of all time, the Boeing led Space Launch System, or SLS, which is currently under development but has seen numerous delays and has been criticized in some quarters as a bloated jobs program. Affixed to its summit will be the Orion capsule, for which Lockheed Martin is the primary contractor. In addition to these missions, which will be all NASA's efforts, there will be 5 launches carrying the building blocks of the Lunar Mini Station Gateway, which will serve as a staging point for the moon landing. There will be there will be carried out between 2022 and 2024 by private space companies, which NASA will pay for their services. The orbital station will initially consist of a simple power and propulsion element and a small habitat module. In 2024, astronauts will stop there en route to the moon. They will then descend to the surface of a lander. A part of the lander will remain on the moon, while the other part will take off and allow the astronauts to return to their station, while they will board the Orion capsule and return to Earth. Bridenstine said on Thursday that NASA had chosen private firm Maxar to build the station's first module, the power and propulsion element, which would rely on huge solar panels. In the coming months, NASA will have to decide on who will build the lander. Aerospace giants such as Boeing and Lockheed Martin are vying for the contract, as are new players like Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin. We're not owning we're not owning the hardware. We're buying the service, said Bridenstine of the lander. The goal here is speed. 2024 is right around the corner. So a moon mission, first an unmanned moon mission next year in 2020, then a moon mission to land the first woman and man on the moon by 2024. Hello?
Yeah, I see. We have a. Is that Mike? There's another icon.
Yeah, yeah. I think we all sat into the same icon, same
Yeah, that's me. I'm here.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, there you go.
yeah, we sent it to the same account. Yeah, so moon mission by 2024, unmanned moon mission by 2020.
So they're talking about having a way station on the way to the moon. So there's going to be a docking point where you would then board, and then from that point go to the moon and vice versa.
Yeah,
Back to this docking point, and then back to Earth.
yeah, it's from what I read and saw, it's supposed to be a like the space station hovers above the Earth. They want, I think it's called the Gateway. It's going to hover above the moon, and from there, it's going to descend down to the moon, and vice versa, like you said.
Yeah, I didn't catch the article, so I'm not gonna be able to comment on it.
Black Cyber Network says sounds like a military checkpoint. It's one way to look at it.
Yeah, that's one way. All right. This one comes from space.com. Elon Musk says it's so far so good for SpaceX's first 60 Starlink satellites. SpaceX Internet satellite mega constellation appears to be off to a good start in low Earth orbit. The first 60 members of the company's Starlink network launched last night, May 23rd, atop a Falcon 9 rocket. The satellites deployed smoothly about an hour after liftoff and then came online shortly thereafter. SpaceX founder and CEO Elon Musk announced via Twitter last night. Musk gave us another update this afternoon, tweeting so far so good in response to a follower question about Starlink's status. Krypton thrusters operative. Satellites initiative orbit raised every 90 minutes. He added in another tweet a bit later, the satellites deployed at an altitude of 273 miles or 440 kilometers and are making their own way to their operational altitude of 342 miles or 550 kilometers. Some lucky space watchers have even captured glimpses of the Starlink train passing overhead. This is a video of it, but we're not going to show the video. Saw the video, and it is pretty cool. So it show all 60 satellites going in a straight line. Starlink is designed to provide affordable internet access to people around the world. Last night's launch was the first of many for the project. About 400 satellites are needed for minor coverage and 800 for moderate coverage, Musk has said, and the constellation could end up being truly enormous. The Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, has given SpaceX permission to launch nearly 12,000 Starlink satellites. For perspective, there are only 2,000 operational spacecraft in Earth orbit today. They're gonna almost six times that. Okay, if everything goes well, Starlink could end up generating 30 billion to 50 billion in revenue every year for SpaceX. Musk said earlier this month in a call with reporters that's far more than the company's launch revenue, which tops out around 3 billion annually. SpaceX has launched a website for the constellation, starlink.com, to explain its massive scale. SpaceX hopes to use this money to develop and build its Mars colonizing transportation system, which consists of a 100-person spaceship called Starship and a giant rocket known as Super Heavy. This reusable duo could start flying people to the Red Planet as early as the mid 2020s, Musk has said. But Starlink will have to overcome some competition to be successful. Several other companies, notably OneWeb, Telesat, and Amazon, plan to launch big broadband constellations to low Earth orbit as well. Wow. So they want to launch their own satellites. This could be pretty interesting. I saw the launch last week Thursday, and the launch went well. There was Falcon Heavies, well, Falcon 9 heaviest payload. The fairing can only fit 60 rockets,
Satellites, yeah,
60
60
satellites.
satellites.
In its fairing, it was a tight fit. The nose obviously had space because the way it's shaped, and they need about I think the article said about 800 for a moderate reception, but still, just the sheer scale of this project is impressive. Hello.
Yeah. So you're probably going to see a whole lot of competition come out of this. Whether it's direct TV or I know most of these satellite companies, dish-based companies, have been talking about providing internet service and cellular communication service, or sat phone-based service. So this has been talked about for years, but you're starting to see the fruition now because they have the momentum, them being SpaceX and Blue Origin. So let the competition come. Let them put their chips down and the results come out, because that's just going to make it a lot cheaper going forward for different service providers.
Right. Right.
And for anyone who thinks this is just more pie in the sky talk, I just provided a link. That's footage that an astronomer in the Netherlands captured of the Starlink payload. Right, after the launch of the Starlink satellites from the payload,
Yeah.
he shows a short video of what he caught, in his telescope.
Like I said, I saw it. It looks really nice.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yep.
looks. This looks like wow. They in a straight line too.
Now, is this in space or is this, in the vacuum?
It's in a Dyson.
I wonder if it's in a Hoover.
You know what? No, and it's actually in a what's that real fancy schmancy one? Actually, my stepmom has one. A Kirby. It's in a Kirby.
Yeah. All right. Our next article comes from Teslarati. SpaceX's Starlink satellite sparked fights between astronomy spaceflight fans. Just a handful of hours after SpaceX successfully placed all 60 of its first Starlink version point 0.9 satellites in orbit, ground observers began capturing and sharing spectacular nighttime views of the spacecraft. Soon after, fans and practitioners of astronomy and spaceflight began bickering. The topic of concern: light pollution, not from lights on the ground, but from sunlight reflecting satellites in orbit. Immediately after launch, the train of 60 Starlink satellites were undeniably spectacular, easily visible to the eye, and as brighter or brighter than the brightest star in the sky. They were pretty bright. For the first part, reaction seemed to lean more towards awe than concern, but it didn't take long for people to begin exploiting the 60 satellites to Starlink's peak of around 11,900, and some responses began to paint SpaceX's constellation in a more negative light. Fans, communicators, and practitioners of astronomy quickly grew into the loudest voice in the room, as fans of SpaceX and Elon Musk targeted them to engage, ultimately making it clear that low Earth orbit mega constellations could soon become a highly controversial topic for unexpected reasons, as is typical of humans in the age of social media. The gentlest hint of controversy and criticism swelled into wow. That's pretty um, head on right there. Swelled into stone throwing between two crystallized sides, unwilling to breathe and engage in civil debate. Holy crap! That's a. Hmm. Meanwhile, barely 24 to 48 hours had elapsed since the first Starlink satellite reached orbit, not their final orbit, but an insertion orbit at around 450 kilometers. Almost immediately, serious, obs- serious observers noted that the Starlink satellites were rapidly spreading out and dimming as they got to work raising their orbit with onboard ion thrusters situated in an urban area. Tesla writing, for, Tesla writing photographer Tom Cross described the Starlink train as way too faint to capture on the evening of May 25th, although they were still subtle visible to the naked eye. From a, I wonder how many people thought that those were spaceships. From a practical perspective, it should come as little to no surprise that Starlink satellites are visible, even highly visible from the ground, particularly in areas with minimal light pollution. SpaceX's flat flat panel design and the location of each antennas mean that each satellite will have a metallic shiny surface constantly facing towards the ground, perfect for reflecting sunlight. Additionally, every satellite has a fairly large solar array, likely measuring about 3 meters by 12 meters. Combined, the 60 satellites have a collective solar array area of more than 2,000 square meters, nearly the same size as the International Space Station's football field size arrays. These are wow. However, the visibility of SpaceX's Starlink satellites for laypeople was never the most contentious concern or a leader of vitriolic responses. Rather, even if the 12,000 proposed Starlink satellites are minimally visible to the naked eye, they will almost certainly still appear in the sort of long exposure images used by astronomers to catalog, track, and better understand the universe. Wow. This is a responsible concern and one that should come as little to no surprise, given that astronomy already deals with the thousands of operational and defunct satellites, rocket upper stages, and pieces of large space debris already in Earth orbit. The problem with giant LEO constellations is that satellites in LEO can appear far brighter and far larger than the traditional geostationary satellites used to provide communication services. This is a critical benefit of the spacecraft. A geostationary distance of about 36,000 kilometers to or 22,000 miles create major latency lag problems for communication networks. Will Starlink, alongside other constellations from Telesat, OneWeb, and LeoSat, destroy the night sky as we know it, ruining the perfectly untouched cosmos for the rest of eternity? Will Starlink immediately create a global utopia by affordability connecting every single human on Earth to the internet, all while being completely invisible and undetectable from the ground? No, 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 and no. As with 99.99% of things, the reality will fall somewhere in the middle, and its consequences and benefits will be far more gray than black and white. Oh, slow more. As more level-headed spaceflight fans and astronomers thankfully point out, we need to wait weeks, if not months or even years, to actually understand the potential impact LEO, LEO mega constellations might have on science and society. It will likely be beneficial for SpaceX, thus far silent, to open a dialogue with those concerned about those potential impacts. It will also serve astronomy well to find ways to cope with space-based infrastructure meant to eventually benefit tens of millions to billions of people, ranging from astronomers themselves to underprivileged members to developing societies to accept trade-offs and make compromises to be human. Okay. So Tesla is not the only company that wants to launch satellites for internet. At least four other companies want to launch satellites also. And they do have a
You mean SpaceX?
space. Who did I say? Tesla.
Tesla.
Yeah, SpaceX. Um, there's valid concerns.
I just wanted to reply to Black Cyber Network. He says whoever finds out how to clean space debris the cheapest will save the future of space travel. We talked about this months ago that the Sanford and Son of lower Earth orbit and so on and even beyond that will become the new blue collar jobs. You know, the people who can come up with a autonomous vehicle to open up its hatch and collect a lot of that space junk and clean it up. That's a you know a 40, 50, 60, 80 year job. You will always have work to do. It's a blue collar job. So you see many trash companies such as Waste Management, Capital, Sunrise Scavengers. You're going to need that sort of stuff up in space at some point, and that's why it's important to actually study a lot of this stuff that we talk about because this is going to be something that the United Nations is going to come up with um, their own agenda to say, hey, whoever can, who's willing to take a risk to clean up some of the space junk, um, we're willing to compensate you for it. I think, black men being the blue collar that they are, this is the perfect area. We talked about roadside assistance, like AAA. In space, they're going to need the same thing for some of these satellites that malfunction. Um, whether they're cube-based satellites or full-scale satellites, if those satellites need swap out components, they need fuel to extend their duration. A lot of that stuff is blue collar work in space. So what I'm saying here is pay attention to that part of the market. There's a myriad of things that's going to come out of all of this, and it'd be interesting to see if anybody can come up with an idea or of how to implement space debris and put it on the blockchain to determine whether or not that stuff has been cleaned up because it's immutable on the distributed ledger.
I don't. Should we engage in a little bit of business modeling here, real quick?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's say because every satellite is cataloged, right? It's cataloged by whatever the managing space agency, the nation, and its designated space agency that from which the territory where it launched from. Okay, the space agency that governs that territory has a record of what type of satellite, what type of space apparatus it was.
Hey,
Okay.
listen. Hey, I gotta do something real quick, but go ahead.
Oh, no, what's up, man? Do I need to? Do you need
No,
to
no,
go to
no,
a next?
no. I'm a mute. I gotta do something important real quick.
Okay. Um, so you do the research on what that satellite was. They'll give you the I'm trying to remember what the number is called for each piece of equipment that's sent up into orbit. Okay. There's a collection of data points that have to be submitted to the managing space agency that lets them know what is on board that satellite. See, because truth be told, some satellites that are up there in the atmosphere right now have onboard weaponry, right? That can beam lasers and shit like that. That the fact of the matter is that the most developed nations on the planet have satellites up in the sky right now with these types of capabilities. So there has to be a record of what's on board of these satellites. Now, if you go for say like the lower rung commercial satellites or the CubeSats or whatever, you can then figure out who made it and what type of precious metals, rare earth materials, all that type of stuff may be on board these things. So then you can start to assign a recycle value on all the types of precious metals, the gold tinting and foiling, maybe the platinum, the platinum plating, and all these different types of things. You're going to recapture all of these materials, and that is what gives the entire operation the value. So you're not just going up there to literally just collect trash. There's a process element once you acquire that satellite, once you snatch that decommissioned satellite out of the orbit where it's floating in or whatever. Okay, there's going to then be a recapturing plan that you're going to then institute once you bring it back down to terrestrial land. So when we talk about these types of things, understand that there is a pre-existing market for recaptured materials. This is the reason why computers are not just thrown, they're thrown in the trash, yeah, but why do you think people go through and pull them out? There's a lot of gold in them. There's a lot of like precious metal type materials that are in it, that when you recapture it, okay, as in sum total, either so take China for example. Okay, anything that you build that's in a large quantity to them, that you make a deal with for them to be a supplier to you, one of the things that they're always going to negotiate into that is they say, okay, look, if you guys are going to like chunk this stuff, we want it back. Because of all the materials inside of it.
Right. I mean, don't forget about the dead rovers that sit on different, different planets and moons and stuff like that. That stuff could actually be reclaimed. A whole recycling operation could be built out of that.
Yeah.
Let me address one of the questions that DE has. He asked in the chat, will the American, Chinese, or Russian military allow their satellites to be taken out of orbit? My understanding is that those satellites also have self-destruction mechanisms built into them, just so that you can't capture it. I know that the last 10 years or so, I think maybe even further back, a Russian satellite randomly just fell out of the sky, and no one really knew how that happened. Russian space agency, I think Roscosmos had accused the Americans of doing this. I don't think he said Americans per se, but he accused the West of being involved in sabotage. Sabotage is very, very much a real issue. So they have to develop some kind of police vehicle to travel around the Earth to monitor their satellites. That's the only way they're going to actually be able to apprehend who's involved in this. The accusation was that the West, or the Americans per se, went up to that satellite that the Russians had and knocked it off its course by nudging it physically with a drone, and forced the satellite to come down out of its orbit. This is serious business. You're gonna end up needing border security, like how you have in the United States. You have border security at the the Mexican border. You may need to have some form of satellite police guarding certain satellites. It may get to that because there's so many satellites up there, and the last article that Lionel read, they're talking about doubling the amount of satellites. So you're talking 4,000 plus satellites from different countries and different purposes. A lot of this stuff has to be monitored in some way, shape, or form. What happens when only one country has a drone up there and they're using it to knock down satellites in the middle of the night, and no one has the way to respond for incident response? You're going to need an alternative agency to actually monitor a lot of this stuff physically. That means you're getting into high-speed pursuits in space. You're chasing down one drone to keep it away from your collection of satellites.
I mean, yeah, and Mike, you say these things as if these are flighty concepts, that these are just figments of our imagination, and all this stuff. Even though very real legal disciplines such as exopolitics, galactic treaties, stuff like that, they exist. These are very real things, right? The United Nations, right, it kind of sits as a nexus point in a lot of discussions that are had with regards to nations who are trying to have treaties with each other with regards to activities in space.
Mhm.
So these are very real things, and I would challenge anyone to argue that exopolitics isn't an actual jurisdiction or discipline of law.
Mhm. Mhm. DE asked in the chat, does the Space Force come to mind? Yeah, you're gonna need a Space Force. You know, it's gonna be.
Wait a minute. Well, for all of our Trump supporters out there, and I think you know who I'm talking about. Didn't he announce not too long ago a whole new division of the military devoted specifically to space?
Right, an actual tangible force.
Like we're talking about a legit like literally a whole branch of government dealing specifically with space.
Mhm.
He announced that, or am I off?
No, you're on point with this.
Okay, all right. Just thought I'd ask.
Paul Bryant, what's going on, my brother?
All right, I'm back. All right, you all ready?
Yeah, waiting on you.
Okay. All right, let's get to our next topic. All right. Next topic comes from interestingenneering.com. Mining in space, what it means for the economy. The mining of celestial bodies and the research, as well as the use of space resources, has gone from science fiction to a palpable reality. Considering the near Earth asteroids and candidates for the first mining incursions outside of our planet, there are already initiatives on the international scale that addresses these future activities seriously and rigorously. President Obama signed the so-called space law approved by the U.S. Congress, whose latest title allows companies in the country to exploit space mining and the appropriation of asteroids and other space resources. The concept of space mining began to develop in the early 90s but caught momentum on November 25th, 2015, when President Obama signed the so-called space law approved by the U.S. Congress. Its latest title allows companies in the country to exploit space mining and the appropriation of asteroids and other space resources by private individuals and companies if they get the technology to move and exploit the bodies rich in minerals such as platinum, gold, iron, and water. The law makes it clear that whoever is capable of recovering resources from an asteroid has the right to own, transport, use, and sell it.
I'm
However,
sorry. Whoa. I'm sorry. You need to read that part again.
the
You need to
law
please read that.
the law makes it clear that whoever is capable of recovering resources from an asteroid has the right to own, transport, use, and sell it. However, this is not something novel, as the Americans have transgressed the rules of maritime law to space. So, as the law stands, that's the law that stands right now.
And that law was passed by who?
President Barack Obama.
Interesting. So there's actually a law. There's actually a law on the books with regards to U.S. jurisdiction pertaining specifically to mining asteroids and who's entitled. I mean, this is a law or a bill that's actually very specific. So I want to clarify for people who may have just heard that. So you mean to tell me that if you have a credible way of getting up there to mine, and they actually got very specific about the types of minerals. What did they say?
Gold, platinum, iron, and water.
Oh, okay. So they're saying they're actually stipulating in law, if you can bring that shit from an asteroid down here, what did they also say about what you're entitled to?
You can own it, transport, use, and sell it.
I
So,
have nothing else to say.
so somebody can has potential to be in possession of billions, at least billions of dollars. In addition to that, The U.S. cannot reserve sovereignty rights because the claim of celestial bodies by governments is expressly prohibited by the International Treaty of Outer Space, signed within the UN in 1967. This treaty states that nations cannot have territories in space. Wow, so that's a big one right there. This treaty states that nations cannot have territories in space, i.e., no country can claim exclusive ownership over any celestial body.
Whoa, whoa,
Excuse me.
whoa, 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 whoa. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Um, there was a guy by the name of Super Sly something rather, and he made this erroneous assumption that somehow you can own a lane of space or something. Can you repeat what you just said, Lionel,
Um,
for
this,
clarification purposes?
this treaty states that nations cannot have territories in space,
Well,
i.e.,
there you
no
have it.
can claim exclusive ownership over any celestial body. Therefore, the race for the lucrative exploration and private exploitation of space has begun, and it is only necessary that technological advances allow it. It is something that companies are already immersed in, and that could be extremely profitable at a spatial level. These companies are investing in developing probes capable of approaching asteroids to try to exploit their resources, which are innumerable. They are also attempting to find the most suitable candidates for their first expeditions among the rocky bodies that orbit the Earth or accumulate in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. There are many companies interested in asteroids, such as Deep Space Industries, Orbital Sciences, Orbital Sciences Corporation, Mars One, Bigelow Aerospace, etc. The Blue Origin Aerospace Company, owned by Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, is building a rocket called the New Glenn, which is a huge astro rocket. It's bigger than Falcon Heavy. The SpaceX firm, founded and run by entrepreneur Elon Musk, founder of Tesla Motors and PayPal, is carrying out cargo missions to the International Space Station with its recyclable Falcon 9 Dragon rocket and has plans for the future beyond the orbit land. Planetary Resources, a group supported by Google executives Larry Page and Eric Schmidt, film director James Cameron. Oh wow, he's in it too. Magnate Richard Branson, owner of Virgin, and other Silicon Valley shareholders, is also in the race. It is estimated that some asteroids could contain all the platinum. Oh my God! Actually, I read this. I'm going to interject here, but um, as we dig deeper for these metals, we run out, and that's why we got to dig deeper to find more. That's why I was saying the largest gold mine is in South Africa, and they have to dig deeper to find more gold because they're heavy metals and they tend to sink toward the middle of the Earth. And these asteroids are made from the same materials, so they have the same gold, platinum, and so forth. It is estimated that some asteroids could contain all the platinum obtained from landmines in all of history and have a market price of hundreds of billions of dollars. In fact, it is presumed that some contain iron, nickel, or cobalt in sufficient quantity to cover the needs of the Earth for 3,000 years. Excuse me. Bernstein's Wall Street research firm says a large asteroid called 16 Psyche, excuse me, in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, with an extension of 200 kilometers wide, could contain enough nickel ore to cover the current human demand for millions of years. And these are just asteroids. These we're not talking about planets either. There are about 12,000 asteroids that pass each year close to the Earth, from large rocks to pieces several kilometers in diameter. Also, it would be easier to land on 10% of them than on the moon. Yet the fever of the conquest of asteroids is as strong as ever, and the battle to commercially exploit the riches of the space has only just begun. The endeavor is even more heated if you take into account, excuse me, that many of these raw materials that are indispensable for modern history, such as zinc, tin, silver, copper, lead, etc., could be exhausted on Earth throughout this century. But all the interest that asteroids awaken does not end solely on the economic question. Apart from the extraction of materials and precious metals, it is it is considered that the rock fragments whose resistance, very similar of that to that of concrete, has allowed them to exist for millions of years. Wow. And this could serve as logistical support for future human settlements on Mars. So they're saying there's some asteroids out there whose it is considered that the rock fragments who they're so strong that they can be a jump off point to get to other places, like stop off points. It could further offer water, oxygen, and other elements that could be used to promote fuel and vital backup systems in space as a much lower cost than carrying them from Earth. Because for every pound you have to get off Earth, for every pound it costs no less than $10,000, and that's why I'm a big proponent of digitizing things because it's that much less. We are already putting the infrastructure for interplanetary internet already.
And Lionel, if you recall in previous conversations, we also did a lot of business modeling. We talked about the fact that what if what if you what if you got onto an asteroid, but you weren't trying to actually process the materials to bring it back here, but to actually take it somewhere else in space?
You're right. That's what you would do.
Yeah,
The platinum, the gold. If you bring it here, you'll crash the market. But gold can be used for different functions in space, such as it's a lot of the components in a lot of these rovers and all are made of gold plating. The James Webb Space satellite, not satellite, but telescope, it's gold plated. Gold is useful, platinum is useful, iron ore is useful, carbon is useful, water is absolutely useful because you can get uh, oxygen and rocket fuel from that.
and one Lionel, one last thing I did want to chime in. It's not a departure from what we're talking about here, but it's relatable, right? Because at what a lot of people may not necessarily realize or understand, but on Wednesdays, Wednesdays and Fridays are the nights where we cover topics that deal largely with where I'm about to go. But with regards to this trade war that's taking place between the U.S. and China, the gambit that the Chinese are about to play right about now is going to be the withholding of access to rare earth metals.
Hmm.
Okay, because they've got the market on it.
Right.
So, in lieu of you initiating a trade war, and then the Chinese all of a sudden says, "Okay, well now, your uranium and all these other lithiums and all these other types of rare earth metals are now going to be at a premium to you. You got to go and get it from somewhere, right?"
Right. Um,
Just saying.
Also, it says a trip to Mars will be much cheaper and more efficient if you could get some of the fuel along the way, which is correct.
Exactly.
Much of the fuel that's burnt is overtaking gravity when the rocket leaves Earth's atmosphere. And that is where the asteroids and the moon intervene, which would be essential to colonize the human presence on the Martian soil as a preliminary test. The red planet has always been an object of the imagination of the human being who has looked at the planet with eyes full of conquest. The moon fell into our clutches in 1969, although we abandoned its exploration too early, and Mars has been the target of NASA since it began sending probes in the mid 1960s. We just went over an article which stated there was a celestial outer planetary celestial object named Thea that crashed into the celestial object, which made those that and that impact made the Earth and the Moon. So with that impact, the Earth and the Moon are therefore made of the same material. So a lot of the material you find on Earth, you can also find on the Moon. And the Moon is a jump off point. You can get to other celestial objects. It makes that journey quicker. And the Moon's doesn't have an atmosphere, which means a lot of the say LMO near what the near Moon objects actually impact the Moon. So you see a lot of craters. So you can catch them, see what I already know what material is on it, and use that material to get to other celestial objects. And also that loose rocky moon dust called regolith, you can build things with that. You can compress that into a brick-like formation. I'll be fun fact. Okay, regarding the moon, it is a great it is a great reserve of raw materials that are in the process of running out on the planet. With natural resources decreasing by the minute due to the high demand of the world industry and the exponential growth of the population, the moon presents an abundance of the helium-3 isotope. This is a very scarce gas on the planet, which could become the ideal non-pollution fuel for a new generation of controlled fusion nuclear plants. Not to mention the richness of the lunar soil in titanium, iron, and aluminum. Just what I said, that's in the titanium, iron, and aluminum, and water is um, in the lunar soil. There's metric tons of water in the lunar soil, and I got that from Jeff Bezos. This is why Europe set its sights on reaching the moon in Japan, as well as Mexico, plan to launch their first mission to the satellite in 2018. However, the director of NASA, Charles Bolden, declared in 2013 that the agency ruled out conducting an inhabited lunar mission, although not the possibility of participating in it if it is conducted by another country or is the product of an association with private companies. Okay, so they wanted it to be an all NASA thing. Okay. Hmm. In this context, NASA has raised the idea of sharing their knowledge, their engineers, and access to the facilities and equipment with American companies to help. They gonna charge them to help conceive their build robotic devices capable of landing by planting loads between 30 and 50 kilos. With reasonable budgets, it will be possible to send missions to inhabit the moon in a decade. Excuse me. It is clear that both the moon and the asteroids are objects of mining in space, and there are several countries and a few companies focused on the exploration and use of extraterrestrial resources. Delving a bit into history, space mining has its antecedents in the North American specialists of the Bureau of Mines, the official mining organization of the United States. This organization tried the real possibilities of mining on the moon, including the excavation and crushing equipment that could be used in the null atmosphere, which means no, there's no atmosphere. Its transport, maintenance, and the possibilities of using certain mining mineral compounds. Um, this is exciting to me, but I don't know if it's exciting to other people. Do y'all want me to continue reading it?
I mean, I'm listening in. I also wanted to welcome our cohort here, Paul. Hey, how's it going, Paul?
What's
All
going
right,
on,
Good morning,
Cobra?
gentlemen.
what's going on?
What's going on,
Mike,
brother?
Lionel,
All right, doing?
Ulysses, Complex, good morning.
Um,
Chat.
But yeah, Lionel, continue.
could the asteroids become a future source of resources? Some companies are already starting to get on the bandwagon of space mining, opening the door to great possibilities but also immense challenges. There are two things you should know about asteroids. One is that they can cause our extinction, and the other is that they can make us rich. For the first, there is substantial evidence, and for the second, not so much. That said, will the asteroids be a source of resources soon? Will human veracity reach the moon as well as other celestial bodies for mining and resources? The only clear thing for now is that it will take decades to know if those who invest today in space mining are visionaries or just crazy. The solar system is not a textbook diagram in which planets evolve cleanly around the sun. In the interplanetary space, there are millions of celestial bodies of multitude of forms and sizes without traffic guards and that order their orbits. At least 18,000 of them, or the near Earth asteroids, NEAs, approach us less than 1.3 times the distance to the Sun, and there are many NEAs left to discover. What they're saying is, even though you're fed a clean description of the solar system, you got these 9 planets, you got these rocks here, is much more convoluted than that. It's much more crowded than that. Um,
I like how that looks like an eye.
yeah, like a cat eye. The Earth travels through space as if by a highway to the opposite direction, in the opposite direction. Every day, several objects of a few meters in diameter fall to the planet, which disintegrates in the atmosphere. The warring objects are somewhat greater. In 2013, an asteroid 20 meters in diameter exploded over the Russian city of Chelyabinsk, releasing energy tens of times higher than the Hiroshima bomb and injuring more than 1,200 people. It is the largest object that has been reported since 1908. Then there was another similar explosion on the Tunguska, Russia. No asteroid detection program saw it coming. Space agencies do not devote more and more resources to watch the sky in vain. They do it so that if an asteroid is really going to present a danger to the planet, it gives them time to do something about it. But the asteroid, in addition to distrust and scientific curiosity, are undisturbed remains of the materials with which the planets were formed 4.6 billion years ago, like I always say. In space, there are approximately billions of dollars in the form of metals, fuel, and essential compounds for life. Chris Lewicki, director of Planetary Resources, one of the companies that have space mining as one of their central objectives, even mentioned that in principle, you can do anything with the metals that you extract from the asteroids. He has, as he sees, the universe is your mining factory. A website term, a website named Asterank, uh, which I quote a lot, created by a former engineer from Google and later purchased by Planetary Resources, estimates the value of asteroids. It takes into account what is known about their composition and estimates their value to be more than $1 trillion. Hence, the economic implications of space mining are immense and undeniable if all its possibilities are explored to the fullest. It might possibly disrupt the economy of the Earth to a large extent, but it is a necessary evil if we want life on Earth to sustain for hundreds of years. I think this is the last one. Okay. Advanced equipment is predicted to be used by remote controls and machines of the future that is simple, light, and resistant. We are also expected to exploit the natural resources of space that will provide vital support to the human settlements on satellites like the moon and planets like Mars. Complementing, com- Contemplating the future is the smart thing to do where life on Earth is concerned. Science, which is ultimately what has solved the serious problems posed to humanity during the course of its history, will be the one that takes us from the planet and leads us to the conquest of the cosmos. It will be necessary to use the energy and mineral resources of space to sustain life, future life on Earth. Nobody can predict the future with certainty, as Mark Twain said. Prediction is difficult, especially about the future. However, what is undeniable is that we are at the beginning of our success in the exploration of space. Although sometimes the reality is slower than our desires, in the next half century, we will inhabit the moon and Mars and will be hovering other planets of the solar system, and we will extract the minerals of the asteroids. The first Earthman might be born on a space base. Let's hope that the 21st century will bring us many answers to innumerable questions that still need to be solved. Another discoveries that we able have yet have not yet been able to dream of. Just want to make one quick comment. I mentioned Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin. Uh, Everybody knows Jeff Bezos on Amazon, but there's a show called The Expanse that was canceled. It was a Netflix show. It was canceled, and it was about space, how we'll be in a not so distant future living on Mars, in the asteroid belt, mining asteroids. That very exact same thing this article talks about. Jeff Bezos saw that this show was canceled and saved it. He purchased the rights to this show and brought it to Amazon. So now it's continued to run on Amazon. Um, that's an inspiring show. It really puts into perspective what Earth will be like, humans will be like in the not too distant future. And I'm curious as to why he did that. It's pretty interesting. And before we open this up to open mic, I saw this and I thought it was interesting. It's basically the Mars rover that's going to Mars in 2020. Some You can register to send your name to Mars. Thought this would be interesting. I'll put this down in the description. It's pretty cool, in my opinion. Hello.
I can hear you, Lionel. Fine.
All right. How you doing today, Paul?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
I'm all right.
Yeah, great stream so far. A lot of good information. As we always cover here in the Black Brain Trust. A lot of good directions. A lot of highly relevant information here. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
Hey, Paul.
Complex. How are you, sir?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Happy Memorial Day to you over in Germany.
Well, I'll say this. My brother, my brother is former special forces, so for him it's not a holiday, it's not a celebration. He honors the Force Recon Marines who came before him. Um, a father who fought in Korea, grandfather fought in the Big War. Our uncles and cousins who served in the Army, the Navy, and the Marines. So that's what that is. So it's pretty much all I'll say on that topic. But you know, someone, someone in the chat. I don't want to even scroll back and scroll through. But you have to understand something. The the mindset that the government is short-sighted, or that they're wasting money, or why are they why are they passing laws for space exploration, right? You have to understand something. Those laws would not have been placed by Barack Hussein Obama if these operations were not already in place. They're being conducted by the military. My opinion, I'll state that up front. But as you see this, as you see the technology further developed and further advanced to where it can become monetized, then you're going to see um, mining ops launching off from the Kennedy Space Center to asteroid XYZ with Amazon branding on it. You know, so
Dude, Paul, not to cut you off, but I mean,
yes,
shit. When the government passes a law, that means that it's commercially viable. It's commercially viable now.
there you go. There you go. It's exactly. And the funny thing is, you and I have been talking about this since 2018. The same exact topic. It's here. It's already happening. So the time to get involved in it is now. Whatever way you as an individual can, whether it's coding, um, programming, blockchain, whatever uses those may be, whether you as an individual have a warehouse housing business and you're selling rocket motors, whether you're selling actuators, whether you're selling processor parts. There was a myriad of businesses and opportunities that people have within this field. It's right now. We're in it now. There's not going to be a day when someone comes and says, "This is the official beginning of the fourth industrial revolution." When that day happens, you're already years behind the curve.
Did that ever happen with the third industrial revolution?
Absolutely not. In fact, people didn't even talk about the third industrial revolution until after Henry Ford invented the assembly line. And that was in what, the 1920s or the 1930s, which was literally what, I want to say 30 to 50 years after the Industrial
Yeah, I was gonna say
Revolution.
because it started with, was it either the cotton gin or the printing press? It was one of those two machines.
Correct. Exactly. So the only thing that I'll say now, instead of someone saying that this is the start of the Industrial Revolution 50 years after it, now we're in the digital age, someone is just going to say it 20 to 30 years after it starts. We're in it right now. We're in it right now. And if you do not take advantage, then you know what? You're lost in the sauce. You're gonna wake up one day and there will be a solar panel ring around this entire planet, broadcasting usable energy back down to the surface. There will be mining on the moon, there will be mining on asteroids, there will be mining and habitation on Mars and potentially Venus. And all of this is going to happen within the next 20 to 30 years, viable. And you're going to wake up one day and saying, well, damn, I'm still holding 25-hour hangouts talking about the succubus when this has been going on. What the hell have I been doing? but, but, but I will say this, um, um, someone made mention about silicon, and I spoke about two materials that both you and I, Complex and I always talk about: hemp derivatives and graphene. Right, those two materials, they're of the future. They're extremely lightweight, they're extremely strong, and they have a myriad of uses. Graphene, it's 80 times lighter than steel. It's 100 times stronger than steel. That's the building block material of the future, literally. There are products now, it's extremely expensive and labor intensive to produce. As they refine the manufacturing process, it will replace everything. It also produces, it has also been used to produce superconductors and hypercapacitors. Okay, so imagine taking your smartwatch or your smartphone or your tablet, putting it on your wireless charger, and literally charging in 5 seconds or 10 seconds to a full complete charge. That technology is real. It exists right now. In fact, the those and I hate to talk about a movie that's science fiction. However, from the movie The Black Panther, those Komoyo beads, that's real technology that exists right now, where you have wearable hologram technology on your wrist that you can actually type and in interact text and then broadcast over the internet. That's
There,
real
there's
tech. It exists
there,
right now.
there's so many, dude. There's so many demos. There's so many demos of this stuff done at like Chinese tech trade shows on YouTube.
Right.
Like Paul, you don't have to like convince people. Like literally, YouTube it. You'll see it for yourself.
Absolutely. You know, and two things. AO says, how could one get a hold of rocket motors? I'm genuinely interested.
Hello?
Okay, I'm not sure. Paul ended up cutting out there.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Paul ended up.
Yourself and build them.
Wait, there he is, right there.
Oh, yeah.
Paul,
You're
you
breaking
cut
up.
off.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you
Yeah,
left out on how can one get a hold of then you
Yeah, that's a question in the chat. Somebody was
Yeah,
asking, how
right.
could one? Yeah.
This is how can one get a hold of rocket motors? I'm genuinely interested. You can look up on the internet. It's open source. You can literally download the blueprints. You can source the materials yourself and build it yourself.
Depends on also the size of the rocket and how many stages, because you could use solid state. You could use like solid fuel motors, right?
Correct.
And you can order those offline, or you can order those online. And then what you do is you kind of calculate like the weight of the rocket, how many stages, and then it'll give you like the amount of newton meters of thrust and how many seconds it'll give you that thrust. And then you can do your trig calculations on, okay, per second of the thrust based on the weight of the rocket, how much elevation I'll get per second of thrust, then how many stages I need to add to get to the elevation I need to get to. Okay, so that's an option. And then you could actually go to, I'm trying to remember the source, but there's actual companies that make like they'll make fuel powered rockets. So you use like a liquid nitrogen. Oh shit! I'm trying. Oh, okay, I'm losing my liquid nitrogen, or I'm sorry,
yes,
liquid oxygen
and liquid helium.
Yeah, there you go. The two, yeah, you'd use those two propellants. And there's a myriad of companies that make small, medium, and large scale motors for liquid propelled applications. And then, like I said, if you're doing smaller scaled rockets, you can get away with a myriad of propellant or motor types. Solid state, like I was talking about. You could even do. There's some guys that are even experimenting with like a mix of the two. Quite honestly, there's some guys that are really getting into some exotic stuff. We profiled BPS Space on a couple of the previous hangouts. I would highly suggest following that guy. His name is Joe Bernard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Bernard Propulsion Systems. Yeah, we've profiled this dude a few times.
Correct.
Look at what he's doing to get an idea of all of the things that are possible. Because this guy's doing some amazing stuff out of his apartment.
Joe Black in the chat mentioned HE3 and fusion, no waste. Something else that I've personally covered here on the Black Brain Trust months ago. Fusion containment technology, fusion containment propulsion systems. First of all, fusion containment is real technology. It's real. It exists. It's currently not viable because it takes more energy going in than coming out to begin the initial fusion reaction and then to maintain it over time. So for that reason, currently it's not viable for space travel. But as they're working on the technology, that could be one of the ways for interstellar space propulsion. Because and even if you're not using it for interstellar space production, the byproduct is the absolutely immense amount of energy released from a contained fusion reaction. All right. So for those who don't know, basically fusion containment is how stars operate.
Yeah.
Right? That is literally you have the atoms under intense pressure and gravity. They fuse and they release tremendous amounts of heat energy. Right now, on a massive scale, that's a star. On a tiny scale, that's a energy reactor. Or if you shunt, well, for the resulting release of energy has to go somewhere. So you can direct it out a small nozzle port, you have propulsion. Or you can direct it out, and since energy is neither destroyed nor created, merely transformed, you can then transform that into electricity to power cities. So that's what the CERN project was, CERN, over in France. There has been a million theories about what they're doing, and they're ripping holes in the gravity field, and they're opening portals, and that I can't speak on because I haven't been there to see it. I don't know. The videos that they have released is they're showing that they're working on fusion containment technology. So that's viable. So there are so many technologies that are viable because for interplanetary exploration, for interplanetary exploration and transportation, um, fossil fuels are not viable. They're not. If you're going to launch a rocket and it takes you 11 months to travel from Earth to Mars, that's not viable. You need something much faster. You need something that's even faster than light speed. From one end of this solar system to the other end of the solar system, traveling at light speed still takes 8 minutes. The closest star to the planet Earth at light speed is 1,000 years. That's not viable. So there have to be some other forms of propulsion, even if that means bending space, space warping, teleportation, whatever it may be. But these technologies, you know, you have to be on the leading curve and understand what's really going on here.
Yeah. The closest star is, I think, a little bit further, but you're right. It's the Andromeda Galaxy. That's what's Proxima A, B, and everything. It's the Andromeda Galaxy, and the earliest probes we sent out in the early '60s to the furthest outreaches of the solar system is only now getting to. They just got to Pluto. No, 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 no. It took them 30 years to get to the furthest outreach of the solar planet, and they still haven't gotten to the Kuiper belt yet, which is still within the solar system. Then after that, you got to get to the Oort cloud, which is like extremely far. And you're right. The nuclear fusion, the sheer mass of the sun is what contains that, because once that reaction occurs, it wants to push out. But the mass of the sun, and I don't understand. There's two things people don't understand, and it's not to their fault. It's because we only know Earth. An astronomical unit is based on the distance between the Earth and the sun. We only know Earth. There's nothing on Earth that can give you a visual of how large these objects are. You can fit a little over 1.3 million Earths into the sun. So the mass of the sun pushing back on that nuclear fusion reaction, it's a self-sustaining system. And also the distance to get to these far-flung objects, when you have to travel at least 6 months outside of the moon to get to these objects. There's Where are you going traveling 6 months steadily to get to point A to point B?
Exactly. It's not viable. It looks good. It looks good for TV and
All
movies.
right.
But if you think about it, anywhere it takes you 6 months just to get there, that's not viable. It's
Right.
absolutely not viable.
So you need a self-sustaining energy source, because what happens is it takes you there to get there. The energy you I don't mean to laugh, but stuff like this make me laugh. The energy you need to carry along with you will make the trip, you might as well not make the trip because it's just too far, and you bringing all this fuel with you. It doesn't make sense.
Exactly. And the funny thing is, it literally never made sense. And you know, a lot of people throw out the name Nikola Tesla, all right? But from my experience, very few people have ever actually read Tesla. Nikola Tesla, I have, and I continue to. Nikola Tesla, in his own words, said that he is researching and looking into ways of interplanetary exploration, and it will require methods of propulsion that, to his level of understanding and our current science, do not currently exist, but that does not mean that they don't exist somewhere else.
Mhm.
And it also means that if it exists somewhere else, it can be reproduced on this planet here.
I look at a YouTuber. His name is Arthur Isaac. He talks with a lisp. I think it's a lisp. He
Mhm.
gets way deep into it, and he talks about ways that humans can propel themselves other celestial objects. And the topics he talk about, they're very structured, very structured.
Mhm.
Um, the
Yeah, I'm
last,
subscribed to his channel too.
right, the last one he talked about was, and I might catch flack on this one, but
What is his name?
I
What now?
Isaac, Arthur Isaac, the
Arthur.
last, right, and
I
the
have to
last
check him out.
ISSAC or ISAAC. The
Okay.
last topic he talked about was colonizing black holes, and
Mm.
that topic itself is like you can't just passively listen to that. You have to really listen to it. So I get this is I these are the people I get my information from. Also, Neil deGrasse Tyson has a YouTube channel, Star Talk, where he goes in deep. He talks about this stuff, and you just sit there and learn. So when I talk to people about this stuff, these are the places I'm sourcing my information, because the Arthur Isaac guy, he has people that he worked with, that he sources information from, and he produces the show. He's a part of quote unquote learning YouTube channels you go to actually learn stuff. These are the places I
Well,
source
you
my.
know, it's funny you talked about um,
Hello, Paul, you there? Is it me?
No, I think he might have just dropped out again.
I don't know
Okay.
what his view. I will
Wait,
check
hey,
out.
Paul, Paul,
Here,
you
go, go,
dropped.
go.
Paul, you dropped out. Can you start back from the beginning? You dropped out as soon as you started talking.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. What I was saying is, I find it interesting that he was talking about colonizing black holes, because again, referring back to Nikola Tesla, very few people actually have read Tesla, and what Tesla said was his discoveries were that the nature of what we think gravity is, it's not what our current level of science thinks that it is. That it's actually an it's related to the attractive force between electrons and neutrons and protons. So what he said was, if you can understand that force, and that it is actually a unifying force, you can then understand the true nature of gravity. So where I'm going with this is, when you look at the media and you look at the visual representation of what you see from telescopes now of what is a black hole, you cannot actually see a black hole. What you're seeing is the accretion disk
Mm.
around the black hole. You're seeing the effect of the gravity well pulling in light around it. So, working off of what Tesla said, if you can understand and then manipulate this attractive force, which is what he said gravity actually is, then you can counteract and generate your own gravity field. So you can do exactly what this gentleman said, which is literally, fly around and colonize right next to an actual gravity well, which is what a black hole is.
Right, and
And I find that fascinating.
right, and what he said was not just fly around and you know take energy. like set up shop, like put some type of sphere around it.
Mhm.
And since the black holes, again, a lot of things I say over and over again is to get through people's head that's listening to this. Um, there's nothing on Earth that can show us the distance, the hugeness of space. Earth is nothing but a speck, if that actually, if that. So there's nothing on Earth to give you a generalized idea. If I say that the Earth is 93 million miles away from the sun, and that's one AU, astronomical unit, and the Oort cloud it starts from 20,000 astronomical units to 200,000 astronomical units from Earth, and that's a cloud that surrounds the entire solar system. And that just getting out our solar system is a struggle. So
Mhm.
these are, like Mike say, these are complex conversations that spur imagination, that makes you want to learn more, that makes you want to say what if. And if more of us had these type of conversations, then we would talk less about the other not to throw jabs at anybody, but that is what it is, what it is. And there's a YouTuber called Veritasium.
Mhm.
He talks about the photo of the black hole, and he really teaches you and say, what it really is, what you're really looking at. He talks about the accretion disk. He talks about the the horizon point. He talks about all that.
Mhm.
And these are the YouTube videos that we must look at to get a better understanding. And we will be shunned by
Hello?
other people. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you now.
Yeah. We will be shunned by other people. We will be said, you're this and you're that. But that's when you know that you are elevating your knowledge. You're understanding, not just listening, but you're understanding what they mean, and you want to look it up. You you start to hear things over and over again. You're like, what, what do they say when they say that? And you look at it and they say, oh, you understand more.
Bro, bro, see, that's why one of the things, again, I'm only speaking for me personally. What any one person does, we're all grown, they can do their own thing. All right? You've always heard me say, you have to think your way through. You have to do things differently. You have to think outside of the box. So, for those individuals who choose to maintain the same narratives, go right ahead. Myself, I choose to elevate my thinking as I always have. There is an entire world, there is an entire universe beyond the beyond the myopic view of things that are right in front of your face. So while some people will choose to maintain their same narratives and their same focus and their same conversations, bro, elevating your thinking, esoteric knowledge, STEM, emerging tech, I can go on and on and on and on. I just, those old traditional conversations, my brain cannot even function on those lower levels. It's just what it is. It is what it is.
Oh, subscribe to like Ulysses said, BPS space, and there's also another channel called PBS space, like the channel PBS. He
Hmm.
talks to it too. When people say learn from him, people give and I see on crypto comments, not on here but just in the crypto space, people say, well, crypto, these blockchains are only safe until quantum computing comes in, then they'll rip them apart. But also, he said, well, you have quantum um, cryptography. And when he said that, I was all he went into depth on that. You have not only have quantum cryptography, but you have like 3 or 4 other things also. I'm like, wow, that can secure a connection. What are the I forgot. I don't want to butcher, but I gotta look at this video again. But it's like, wow, I forgot the name of those elements. Yeah. Anything else?
I mean, in light of some earlier discussions that were being had in various neighborhoods within the Black YouTube streets, um, you know, I have to just reiterate, okay, in this venue, these things that we talk about are not they're not subjective, right? They're not really like really privy to be subjective to opinion as far as like maybe like how you may feel about space exploration, for example, right? You may feel some kind of way about it that doesn't exactly change the fact that it's going to happen, right? So these things are going to kind of happen sans any sort of emotional or philosophical views that you may have to the contrary. Doesn't work that way. So what we're trying to do is just understand that this venue is based on objective thought, right? We're really trying to suss out like what we're looking at in today's context, and what is relatable to the future. What are things that we can attach ourselves to give us a vehicle that will carry us into the future? This is a very objective oriented platform that we have here. I really need this to be understood to the people who are listening in. Okay, there's no real debate about things that are actually happening. Okay, like you know what I mean. It's I guess in some aspects this is a very hard concept for some people to grasp, seemingly. However, you know,
It is a hard
if
concept to grasp because what you're doing is you're asking people to elevate their thinking. And at the end of the day,
the
people
nerve of
don't
me,
want
the
to
nerve of
do
me.
that, bro. When people want to remain comfortable, people want to know what their world is, how it's defined. They know their narratives, they know their agendas, they know what they're focused on, and that's what it is. Anything that requires people to take a step back and see everything dispassionately, unemotionally, and purely objectively, and also think higher and elevate their thinking and entertain themes and ideas and concepts without even actually accepting them, but first just entertaining them, people find that uncomfortable.
So what you're telling me, Paul, is I'm asking too much.
For the majority of people, yeah, you are. It is what it is. But you
Okay.
know, it it absolutely is what it is, and
And
that's
I honestly, after today, I don't give a fuck if I'm coming off as an arrogant prick right about now. Just putting that on the record.
bro. I have been called uppity, bougie, arrogant. Think I'm better than that. Hey, my entire life, there is nothing you're nothing you can say to me that's gonna hurt my feelings. So it is what it is. You know, so there was a certain mindset and there was a certain outlook. Listen, power only respects one thing. That's power. Okay? So either you can complain and cry about it, or you can go about the business, just do something differently. And I'm not saying what has been done before is wrong, but you can go out and create your own power, make something new, take a different route, right? There is literally now the galaxy, the universe is open to you.
Oh, Curious Droid on YouTube. He has an excellent channel too. That's where I learned where satellites.
That's the dude who wears the funky shirts, huh?
Yeah, the Hawaiian shirts.
Yep. That's another one I follow. Yep.
Yeah, he gets into it. That's where I learned where when
Hello?
satellites are. Hello, can you hear it?
Yeah,
Oh,
I,
yeah.
I don't I don't know where I left off at. I think
No,
I
I was.
I'm telling.
Curious Droid on YouTube. He wears these Hawaiian shirts when he's talking. Uh, uh, it's pretty funny, but he gets deep into it. That's why I learned where when satellites are at their life end of their life cycle, they're supposed to shoot out to a orbit where become they don't come back into the atmosphere or slam into other satellites. But he really gets into it, and yeah, Curious Droid, yeah, that's his name.
Um, if I could address really quick Joe Black in the chat. No, sir. If you're speaking to me, no, I was not speaking to you, was not correcting you, have had my train of thought had nothing to reference you or anything that you said. Your second question was, what's the name of the book of Tesla? His name is Nikola Tesla, and he has written many books. I would recommend you can look up his name, Nikola Tesla, Tesla, and literally just pick any of his books and just start there. Whether it's his earlier work, his middle work, or his ending work. If the question is specifically about his idea of the true nature of gravity, that would be more towards his later work, especially where he made claim. Full disclosure, he made claim that he developed and designed an anti-gravity craft. Um, there is there are words out there that supposedly the day after he died, the U.S. government raided his office. They took his prints. Several years later, 1953 or 1955, um, Werner von Braun, the first director of NASA, following Tesla's designs and prints, built the U.S. military's first anti-gravity aircraft. All of that I can neither confirm or deny. I don't know, but you can absolutely look up Nikola Tesla and just pick any of his books and start there. One thing that we actually you can confirm now that is current tech now, he invented the broadcast energy transmitter to wirelessly broadcast energy through the air, and that worked. So your wireless chargers, he literally created that technology decades ago.
Mm. All right. Thank you all for tuning out. Well, coming out. Hope y'all enjoyed the show, and that's it. We will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.
Not everyone.